Thank you. Good evening. My name's Howard, and I am an alcoholic. And we have met before, Austri, at several assemblies, etc. Um, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be anywhere, actually, right now. Um, it, you get to a certain age, and it's just nice to wake up in the morning. Um, but I started this journey um, in May of 1974. My sobriety date's May 17th, 1974. Um, I was 23 years old when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did not get here by accident. I was in the United States Air Force. I'd been in the Air Force for about 5 years. At that time, I'd had two Articles 15, which is, those who've been in the military, that's non-judicial punishment. I'd served a couple of stints in the stockade at Lackland Air Force Base. I had served 2 tours in Vietnam, and I was in England. I was stationed over in England when I was charged with assaulting 4 security policemen. Actually, they only charged me with 4. There were 6 of them that got me into the cop car that night. And I'd gotten in a fight in the barracks, and I was a security policeman at the time. And I'd gotten in a fight in the barracks, and the law enforcement people came over to decide to take me into the Who Scout. And I decided I wasn't going to go. And by the time I ended up in the jail, one of those guys had a broken arm and one had a broken nose. And I ended up in jail, and then they took me to the hospital to get a blood alcohol test, and I refused to give it. And the next morning I woke up in the hospital. And when I woke in the hospital, there was some restraints sitting. Thank you. Somebody can help me out there. Some restraints sitting next to the bed. And I said, what are those for? So, well, we weren't too sure, but I just passed out. And I said, why am I in the hospital? So, well, we were afraid if we let the police take you back to the jail, that you wouldn't make it back out. And then my commanding officer, who was the commanding officer of the security police squadron, court-martialed me for assaulting 4 security policemen. And I was convicted. I'm the only person I've ever met who has a court-martial conviction that was not discharged. They fined me $400. And back in 1974, $400 was a little bit of money. They reduced me in rank from E4 to E3, and they put a reprimand in my file. That's like slapping your hand. And that night, after the conviction and the sentence, I went out and got drunk to celebrate. And I was lucky because somebody was with me who was a friend, because I almost got in a fight that night. But he hauled me away. And then my commanding officer called me into his office, and he was very angry. He said, I wanted them to kick you out of the service. And they didn't do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you to a treatment center up at Lakenheath, England. And when you come back and you drink, and I know you'll drink, I can kick you out on an administrative discharge. I don't have to use a court. I can just sign papers and get you out. He's still waiting. Actually, I don't even know if the man's still alive. The good part of this is that a few months later, I've been sober a little while, and I was working this program, I was able to sit down with him and make amends. And that was really a cool thing. But I went through this treatment program at RAF Lakenheath. And some of you who might have been through treatment here somewhere in the United States in the last few years or whatever, it wasn't like treatment here. Treatment in the Air Force at that time, we were about 10 of us alcoholics on the mental health unit, which was a locked unit. And there were other people there that didn't have alcohol problems, various sundry other mental illnesses. And once a day, the alcoholics got together in their own group, and they didn't have any AA meetings in the treatment center. They didn't have big books in the treatment center. They didn't have much of that. But they did allow us to go to an AA meeting on the base in what they call the Social Actions Office. So my very first AA meeting was at the Social Actions Office at RAF Lakenheath in England. And they let me out of the nut ward to go to the meeting. And I went and I sat there. And it was a room kind of this size. No tables, just chairs all around the room. They didn't serve any coffee. The Brits don't serve coffee. Well, they do now, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But they had tea and crumpets. But I sat and listened to these people talking, and yeah, I guess it was okay. The only problem is they talked about that 3-letter word that I didn't want to hear about, and that was God. Didn't want to hear that. So I went back to the treatment program, and this nurse said, well, what do you think of the meeting? Now, this nurse was about, 6'2", a major, male nurse. I said, well, I guess it's okay, but they talk about God, and if I want to hear about God, I go to church, and I don't go to church. And I was looking for an argument, because I like to argue. I still like to argue. I was on the debate team in high school, so I love argument. So I was looking for a verbal discussion, and he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, that's okay. You don't have to go back. Go out and get drunk. I don't care." I said, "What do you mean? I'll go back if I want to." And I went back, and I spent 30 days in this treatment center, and I'm pretty much angry and belligerent. I wasn't an alcoholic in the first place. I was 23 years old, and I'd been in the military for 5 years. I'd served 2 combat tours in Vietnam. I couldn't be an alcoholic. I knew what an alcoholic was because I'm from the Seattle area. I grew up out in Issaquah. And we used to come into Seattle, and there'd be these winos under the bridge drinking with paper bag. And my dad would say, that's an alcoholic. And of course, what I didn't know at the time is my dad was an alcoholic. But I thought that was alcoholism. You were old, decrepit, homeless, drinking cheap wine out of a paper bag. And that was an alcoholic. And I was 23 years old. I was not one of those. And how dare they? But I got out of that treatment program and went back to RAF Upper Heyford, which is just outside of Oxford, England. And I started going to meetings because they required me to. Now, back then, they didn't have you sign slips. That was before slip signing became a thing. But they told me I had to go to these meetings, and the counselor there made sure I went to the meetings. And they talked about sponsorship. Of course, they talked about God and all that stuff, but I just kind of ignored that for a while. I didn't quite understand the sponsorship idea, and I certainly wasn't going to ask anybody to be a sponsor because I don't ask people to do things. But this old guy, and he was old, white-haired, he was an Irishman. Him and his wife, who was English, lived in outside a little town called Banbury, England. And his name was Ted, and he was 52. He was old, white hair, 8 years sober. I thought he was so dry, if you lit a match, he'd go up in flames. But he kind of appointed himself my sponsor. And he took me to meetings. And he was really cool because he didn't say, this is what you have to do, blah, 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 blah. He just shared with me his experience, his strength, his hope. He shared with me how the steps applied in his life and talked to me about how it could apply in my life and help me see some of that. And he took me to meetings and talked to me, and he kind of almost adopted me. So in October of 1974, I had about 5 months sober. Ted said, pack up some clothes and stuff and, bring some nice stuff. We're going to go on a trip. He didn't tell me where we were going, but we went to the southern tip of England, a little holiday village called Selsey Bill. And there was the All England Wales Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous. The week before that in London, they had the World Service Convention or conference. So a lot of people stayed for the All England Wales Convention. We're people from all over the world, the United States, South America, Europe, Africa, all over. 3-day conference or convention. And Saturday night, they had a dance with a real live band. And I'd turned 24 by this, and I was a lot lighter than I am now. And so I get dressed up for this dance with maroon bell-bottom double knit slacks, a pink shirt, white tie, white sports coat, didn't have the pink carnation, white shoes, white belt, just decked out. And I danced the night away. I had so much fun. That's when AA hooked me. Set the hook and reeled me in. I learned that night that there was a life after sobriety. You could be sober and have a good time and not have to drink. And then Ted got me involved in this thing called service. I became the intergroup representative for the Upper Hayford group at the Greater Midlands, the South Midlands Intergroup of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was in Oxford, England. And I served in that capacity. I also served as treasurer for the group and other things. I started out as a coffee maker, but I got involved in that. And then the time came where the Air Force said it's time for you to rotate back. I was about 1.5 years sober. Now, my plan when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I actually had a plan. And my plan was this. I was going to not drink for 1.5 years because I didn't want my commander kicking me out. So I was going to stay sober and do whatever I had to do for that 1.5 years, play the game. And when I came back to the United States, I was going to find the first bar and get as drunk as I could get. That was my plan. It didn't work. I went to one too many AA meetings. I came back and I found an AA meeting. Flew down to Florida, got married to an old high school sweetheart, and then we came to North Dakota. I was stationed at Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota. I'd like to say if you can stay sober in North Dakota, you can probably stay sober anywhere. In North Dakota is the reason I got out of the Air Force. I was there for 1.5 years, come back, time to re-enlist, and I had planned on staying, but they informed me if I re-enlisted in the Air Force, I was going to be able to stay at wonderful Grand Forks Air Force Base for 4 more years. I'd been there 2 winters, 1 summer. Summertime in North Dakota and Grand Forks gets to about 100, 105 degrees. It gets hot there. Wintertime, chill factor minus 90. 90 below zero. So, no, I'm not staying here. I've got another solution. And I got out, packed up the family, and we moved back to Washington State. So I got back here in 1977 and moved into Kent and got involved in AA there and did service work there and met a gentleman named Steve, another Steve.
Yeah. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. Steve C., and I became his sponsor. And of course, a lot of you know Steve. I was his sponsor and close friend for 45 years and 3 months. He had 45 years and 3 months to the day, and the day he passed away from from liver cancer. And I was there with him the night before he passed. It's kind of interesting. I was in a hospital with my father in 85 when he died of this disease we have. Took him at age 59. I was in the hospital with my grandmother when she passed away. She was almost 99. And then I was there in the hospital with Steve the night before he died. The moral of this story is if you're in the hospital, don't call me to come up and visit you. But I never got involved in area service like Steve did, but I've been involved in local service. In fact, I believe in service and I'm still involved in it. My home group just selected me to be, and I love this, I am the representative to the Pierce County Young People's AA. Awesome. So I'm a YPA representative now. And this last year I went to Whiskey Paw. That's the Washington Young People's AA. And then in, I think it was July, I went down, I think it was July, I went down to OCPA, the Oregon State Young People's AA. I was asked to go down there and chair a panel on veterans affairs or veterans in AA. So I've done that, and my term starts in January, so I'll be going to that once a month meeting at the Pierce County Central Service Office. And I think it's wonderful for me because young people really is what makes this. I mean, they're the future of AA. Us old people aren't going to be around that much longer. I mean, and so I'm really happy to be serving in that capacity. I think it's wonderful, and it'll keep me young too. And that's kind of important. July, I celebrated my 74th birthday. Now, I wasn't going to live this long, but this is what sobriety and recovery gets us. My mother, just last Monday, turned 95. Now, I doubt I'll live that long, but, I'm going to keep kicking around as long as I can. But as long as I can stay sober and working this program and being involved in service, it'll be okay. The other thing I do, and I've been hearing some talk going on before the meeting, nothing keeps me young is I still work. I have no intention of retirement. I don't believe in it. And as long as I can do the job, I'll keep doing it. But 22 years ago, Mr. Steve got me involved in, actually it was longer than that, it was 91. Steve got me involved in motorcycling. Steve called me up and said, I bought a Harley. And he'd never ridden a bike before in his life. And he bought a Heritage Softail. And he says, I'm going to go learn to ride. Now, I had ridden before, but I hadn't ridden for years. He said, you want to go with me? I said, I'm not really interested. And he cajoled, and so I ended up going with him to this motorcycle class in 1991. And of course, got out there with it and said, okay, I've been missing this. And so first thing I did, went on and bought Harley. And 11 years later, in 2002, I took an experienced rider course with Steve and a couple other people in the program, and ended up becoming a Motorcycle Safety Foundation certified coach. And I've been coaching now for 22 years, the last 15 at Joint Base Lewis McChord. So I get to teach soldiers and airmen, hopefully, to stay alive out there on two wheels, because that's not an easy thing. And but it's fun. I get to work with these young soldiers and airmen, and a couple of times they've seen something on my bike, an old bike I had the circle and triangle on it. And turns out this guy said, hey, and he recognized that. So, I'm out there, and these young people keep me young. But nothing can happen good if I decide that I'm cured. You know, there's no cure that makes me a non-alcoholic. Talked about the pills to, take this pill, take that pill. They used to talk about it. If there's a pill that allowed me to take it and then drink like a normal person. And I thought, wait a minute. Do you ever watch normal people drink? Okay. Well, so yeah. Normal. I've been out with them. We'll go out to dinner with these people and they order a glass of wine and they sip it slowly through dinner. And by the time it's dinner and there's still wine left in the glass and they say, oh, I've had enough. And I said, what's the point in this? That's no fun. I never wanted to drink like that. I never drank like that. The whole point for drinking was to get as drunk as I could get. Unfortunately, I ended up usually in jail. Been to jail a few times, okay, or in a fight, and I blacked out every time I drank. Just blacking out and drinking, I thought were synonymous. I thought everybody blacked out. So no, I never wanted to drink like a normal person. And in the big book, they says the idea that he may someday enjoy and control his drinking. Well, that's it doesn't make sense to me. If I control my drinking, I'm not going to enjoy it. And if I drink like I enjoy drinking, I will not be in control. There will be no control. So that was never an issue. My issue for me has always been, and every time to time it comes up, my brain is not my friend. Not at all. My brain likes to say to me, you were 23 years old. Maybe they misdiagnosed you. Everybody at 23 drinks like that. Well, number one, that's not true. Everybody doesn't. Not like I drink. And misdiagnosis, all I have to do is be honest. You don't go to jail, get court-martialed, get in these fights. All of this stuff doesn't happen for people who are normal drinkers and not alcoholics. Doesn't happen. 2 DUIs. Cool thing is, neither one of them ever made it on my Washington State driving record, because one was in San Antonio, Texas on Lackland Air Force Base, and the other was in Bedford, England in 1973. But nothing ever made it on my Washington record. So according to Washington State, I've never had one. Good excuse to say, well, I've never had one. Well, I have. Deserve more than that. I got pulled over in Issaquah, Washington once. Two other friends and myself in my car with half a case of beer. We were drinking and I was driving. Get pulled over for a headlight out. Cop says, oh, you got open beer in the car. Kicks the other 2 guys out of the car, confiscates the beer, and has me walk the line. The old touch your nose, walk the line, turn around. Well, when I turned around, I fell down on my butt. I thought I'm done for. And he says, where are you going? I said, Fairchild Air Force Base, because I was stationed at Fairchild at the time. So what do you do there? Security police. That was before England. He says, you know better than that. I said, I do. I didn't argue with him. Yeah, I know better. So I'll tell you what, where do your folks live? On Front Street in Issaquah? He says, you drive down there, get out of this car, and I don't want to see you on the road again tonight, or I will run you in. So I went, woke up my dad, drank a lot of coffee, and a few hours later snuck out the back way of town and made it back to Fairchild. 3 times in Washington State, I've been pulled over so drunk I could hardly stand up, and they let me go. Plus the Texas and in England. Am I an alcoholic? Or did they misdiagnose me? There was no misdiagnosis. But my brain likes to play that little game. And I come to AA so I don't listen to that game. To remind myself that my life's so much better. I have a wonderful job. I have a nice place to live. I have a nice motorcycle and a car. You know, I wouldn't have anything. In fact, I probably wouldn't be alive. And today, I'm 74 years old. I've been sober over 50 years of my life. I drank for 5 years, from 18 to 23. But it hit me hard and hit me fast. And I wouldn't have got here. It wasn't when I got drunk, I got violent and got in fights and got in trouble. And so I was like throwing up a red flag. Here I am. And they saw it. And now I'm here. And this is a wonderful place to be. And this is a great group. I appreciate everybody that's here. Good to see you. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're all here. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.